So this whole chapter has been building to, can we write a linear equation, and what do we do with those linear equations? We've been learning each piece of a linear equation so far, step by step. Now we finally get to put all of those pieces together in writing linear equations. There are 4 different scenarios that you're going to be given in which you will have to write a linear equation. We're going to do 2 of them today and then 2 of them tomorrow. The first scenario is whenever you're given the slope and the y-intercept. You already had some practice with that yesterday. I'm gonna see.
Bless you. And just start over.
Maybe you should start over. There's gonna be a sneeze in the middle.
You didn't get very far in.
We'll do a jump cut.
I feel like it'd be better to start
Okay.
over. You're not very far in, it won't be that. If you were like halfway in maybe, but
Okay.
Just start.
Race to this.
It's about 1.5 minutes. Oh, exactly 1.5 minutes. Okay.
Welcome back. So this whole chapter we have been working on writing linear equations. We've been learning piece by piece throughout chapter 8 how to write them. And it's finally time to put them all together. And then 8, 9, and 8, 10 will be what do we do with them now that we know how to put them together. So there are basically 4 different scenarios in which you're going to have to write a linear equation. We're going to do 2 of them today and 2 of them tomorrow because they're pretty different. Okay, so the first scenario is you're going to be given your slope and your y-intercept. We had some practice with that yesterday. It'd be if I said your slope equals 2 and your y-intercept equals 5. You're going to use slope-intercept form, just like we learned yesterday. You're going to put your slope in, y equals 2, x plus 5. Just like we've been doing. Put both of those into our equation. That's really weird. We'll just pretend that didn't happen. Okay. So hopefully you guys are pretty good at that because we practiced that a lot yesterday. Plugging in when we have a slope and a y-intercept and plugging those both in. The second scenario that you'll be given is they'll only give you the graph. So they're not going to tell you what the slope is, and they're not going to tell you what the y-intercept is. They're only going to give you a graph and see if you can figure those things out. So let's do that together. I'll draw it over here. Okay, so remember we have our x-axis and our y-axis. Too little. I'll get there. Okay. All right. So they've just given you this graph and they've said, can you write an equation of this graph? The very first thing you should look for when you see a graph is where does this graph intersect the y-axis? Because we know that in our slope-intercept form, I'm looking for y equals mx plus b. And the things that we need to know in that equation are the y-intercept and the slope. right? So the first thing I'm going to look at is, where does this line cross the y-axis? I put a point there. And that is at 1, 2. So the y-intercept is going to be 2. Just like we learned yesterday, but now we're doing it backwards. Instead of graphing, we're using the graph to find our equation. So now we have y equals mx plus 2, because we found out that b is 2. Our y-intercept is 2. Now, you're going to have to remember back to 8-6 to find the slope. How do we find slope? To do that, we need 2 points, right? So first we have this point, our y-intercept. We know that our y-intercept is where x equals 0. So when we're doing our ordered pair, we're going to take our y-intercept of 2 is when x is 0. That's our first ordered pair. Our second ordered pair, you're going to have to just look at your graph and look for another point that seems obvious. We could either do, maybe it looks like there's a point here, or maybe one like right here. Either way, I'm going to use this one. This one looks like it's -1 and then 0 because it doesn't go up in our y-axis. Now we're going to label it just like we did in our slope when we were finding slope in the other lesson. x1, y1, x2, y2, and we're going to put it into our slope equation. Hopefully you guys remember that from 8-6. It's the one that looks like this. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So when we plug these numbers in, we're going to get 0 minus 2 over -1 minus 0. When we do that, we get -2 over -1 minus 0, which is -1. Now you guys better remember, 2 negatives, what's that going to equal? It's going to equal a positive. So -2 divided by -1 just equals 2. So now we know our slope, which is our m, is also 2. So we plug it into this equation. Y equals 2x plus 2. And we're done. Same thing as we were doing up here, except when we are not given slope and y-intercept, we have to figure them out.